everybody. It's Recotopia, episode 47. I'm Chris Atkinson.
And I'm Jeremy Scott.
Yes, and today's big recommend is going to be The Player, and this is our, well, I guess it's not our first one of the new year since we did one last year that came out this year, whatever. But this is really the first one that we've done in 2023, which will be hard to talk. Will be hard to say for the first month or two there while we,
Yes, it will.
like, we'll be saying 22, 22, 20. Oh, yeah, it's 23. You got to remind myself. You start.
I'll be scribbling on checks that I write to come up for 22.
Yes. Anyway, glad to see everybody from the chat who are joining us on a Tuesday from Twitch and YouTube. They're watching us talk, and that is an amazing feat for you guys to.
You are hearing me talk.
You are hearing me talk. Yes, the Al Gore doll, if you don't remember. Simpsons. But how are you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing pretty well, other than the damp, dreary outside weather and downpours.
Oh my.
And thunderstorms.
Yeah, raining constantly for the last 24 hours, and then we just got out of a whole bunch of rain and snow and all bunch of stuff last night too. So.
Just keep going.
Yeah. Do you have any small recommends, Jeremy?
I got some smalls, man. I got some smalls. My first small recommend, I'm going to go with the 2014 movie that I had never watched, that I saw earlier in the week, and it's Fury, which is a David Ayer film. And this is a pretty stacked cast. Michael Pena's in this, Shia LaBeouf, Brad Pitt, Logan Lerman, Joe Bernthal. That's basically your tank crew in World War II. And we follow this tank crew for what feels like maybe a few days or weeks. Logan Lerman is the new guy because the guy he's taking over for was killed in a recent battle. Brad Pitt's really interesting in this movie because he's so grizzled, and there's an air of just, he knows so much about what to do because he's seen so much shit in action. Like, he speaks German fairly fluently. He's very decisive. And he plays this grizzled character really, really well. And, he puts Logan Lerman through a pretty tough initiation, basically forces him to kill a German that they've come across. It's like some sort of rite of passage or something. And this is sort of I think it's a weird war coming of age movie for Logan Lerman's character. He feels like the main character, but there's just some really good, well shot war battle scenes. There's a scene where there are 3 American tanks and 1 German tank that is far superior to them, and they bum rush him. They just go right at him and try and flank him, and there's this awesome tank battle. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I was riveted. I don't know that I would say it was an A+, but the performances are really solid. And the action, when it's there, there's a huge showpiece at the end where they pretend their tank is dilapidated and on the side of the road while they're inside with a bunch of guns. It's awesome. Anyway, lots to like in there, but it is, if you have trigger issues with regard to war, battlefields, or sudden bullet impacts and things like that, the movie's full of it. But I really enjoyed it, and I wonder if I even know where you can find it. I was going to give that as part of my information, but I don't have it right now. Anyway, Fury, 2014.
All right. I have this movie on Blu-ray, of course, but I haven't seen it. And I've heard mixed things about it. There's people, I think I've heard more positive than bad, though. So it was one of those movies that I think was trying to be an Oscar contender, and it just fell short. And
it feels like it's going for that. And it's not up to that level as a whole, but I was pretty riveted. I enjoyed the ride.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give a recommend here that may be the first Rec-A-Warn on Recotopia. I don't know. We've gotten close to that before, I believe, but I saw this. I went to New York and there was some time, so I went ahead and watched Avatar: The Way of Water. Now I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I think we're going to see this movie in theaters and forget it, just like we did the first movie. I think it's exactly the way it's set up. Is it's supposed to be a big screen
Mm.
theater experience that you watch during the holidays, and you try to watch it in the most 3D environment that you can. And then after 2 weeks, you're like, you're on to watching other things, and like this, unless you're Dicer, this doesn't stay with you for a long time. He's behind the scenes today. Um I I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't need to be 3 hours. I don't care what James Cameron says about, "Oh, I saw my kids watch a whole bunch of Netflix one day, and that's the same as watching a 3-hour movie in theaters."
Yep.
It's no, it's not, dude. It just isn't.
I wish he'd just make movies and stop talking. I don't need to
Yeah,
hear almost anything he said in the last month. Just make your
no,
movies.
no. I was surprised, and maybe, and things have gotten better on the 3D front. It used to be, when I ran a 3D movie back in the day, you were cutting out a good 50% of the light source,
Mm.
because you had the thing that went in front of the lens, and then whatever, when you're wearing the glasses, cuts down a whole bunch of light as well. So like 3D movies were pretty dark in many ways when you were watching them back 10 years ago or so. Um, this one, I don't know, was super bright, and I don't know if it's just the theater I was at. I watched this movie in Times Square, so it could be like, the utmost in technology with the 3D and everything. But it was very bright, and I think it's a 48 frames per second movie, which I'm not usually a big fan of going over the 24, but it worked pretty well with this. The 48 frames per second, that sort of you are there feeling to it
Mm.
and everything. So I did not like the first Avatar at all. I think this movie is a vast improvement over it. It's doesn't have it's got a different kind of story. This time the Na'vi are like, okay, well, it looks like humans are bastards. We're gonna have to move from our habitat now, and we're gonna have to move in with some other like species of Na'vi. They call them something else. I don't remember what it is, but they're like more of a green color, I guess, or something like
Mm.
that. And they're, of course, being chased down again by Stephen Lang, but not the Stephen Lang from the first movie, but his memories have been put into some sort of petri dish microchip fucking thing.
Nice.
I don't know what it is.
Nice.
And now he's a Na'vi, and like the whole gambit there is that they have to do this because the indigenous I don't know, the animals and stuff will attack anything that's not indigenous or whatever. So it's important for them to be able to fool animals and stuff, which would have been a cool little plot point, but because they like circumvent that immediately, that's never an issue, like them
Mm.
getting attacked by something indigenous. I thought that would have been fun, but they didn't do that. So anyway, they're going after this time, and it takes them forever to explain why the humans are still going after these people. And the new people they live more in the water. That's why The Way of Water is the whole movie. Whatever,
Mm.
they live amongst the water. They talk to the sea animals and all this. And there's this one particular species that is being hunted down for some reason that they don't tell you until about 2.5 hours into the movie, where it's like there's something in their brains that helps humans. That's basically what comes.
It's not unobtainium anymore.
It's not unobtainium anymore. It's some other unobtainium that's in
But is
somebody's.
unobtainium even mentioned? Did they harvest it all? Like what? Like
Mm,
is there?
I. You know what? They probably explain that in this movie. I am not. I have faults like many human beings, and I did not catch what happened with the unobtainium in that. I do know that Giovanni Ribisi shows up briefly, and Sigourney Weaver shows up briefly, and I
And
couldn't
she's
remember.
playing a Navi this time, right?
Yes, and yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. There's some things about it that perhaps if I had rerun the first Avatar, which I'm probably never going to do, I would have been able to keep up with some of the little things, but you don't really have to. That movie is not about plot at all. And there's some pretty decent action scenes in this movie too. I will give it that. There are some pretty decent action scenes towards the end. So overall, I can recommend to you. I think only while it's in theaters. I don't think I would recommend this movie to you if it's just on video somewhere. But only while it's in theaters, you can watch this movie, and I think you can have a good time with it. Just be sure that you have, 3.5 hours to dedicate to
that
it.
means I will not be able to enjoy this movie.
I know, man. I know it's completely unfair that's something so amazing that you'll miss this. Yeah, so
I'll get over it. Well, that seems to be the general consensus from at least the sources that I rely on, is that it's better than the first one, is visually impressive, but it's still really ether in terms of it won't really stick with you. So
I see that by the way, the chat is totally on they know all the stuff that I just you don't have to watch the first Avatar at all. Yeah, I know there's some exposition in Avatar too, but I didn't pay attention to it. I'm sorry.
Why would you? I just
didn't.
So
I didn't watch this movie like a lot of people did, where they're like, yeah, I've got that first Avatar, all that Avatar in my mind when I'm watching this. I didn't. I let some of that stuff go. It was just taking in the visuals, and then a couple of things here and there. Like, it's not bad. Anyway,
all right. Well, I am giving you a second small recommend. There's not really any warn here. Back in the spring, there was a Discovery Plus documentary series of 3 episodes called Hillsong: A Megachurch Exposed. I did not watch this then. I did not hear about it then. I don't even think I have Discovery Plus, although now that Discovery has bought HBO, I'm sure I could access this somewhere. But on the 28th and 29th of December, they aired this on TLC, which is the first time it was on broadcast television. And over the 2 nights, they aired the 3 episodes, and then a 4th, which I have not seen yet, new episode of new information. I don't even know if this is a great documentary. It's fairly well put together in terms of the linear nature of it and sort of peeling the layers off of this onion. They start with Carl Lentz, who's the most famous pastor of Hillsong. This is the guy that was BFFs with Justin Bieber and the Jenner sisters and a number of other celebrities that went to this church. And part of his friendship with them it's revealed as part of his downfall. He was ultimately discovered to be having an affair and lost his job, but he's still with his wife and kids, and they all love him and support him because that's what you do when you read the Bible. But the documentary then goes from there and goes back into both his early days at a different church and some questions, but as well as the Hillsong leadership, aside from this Lentz fella, and some sexual allegations and some assault pushing down the news about and whatnot. Now, I will admit that I am probably more primed to watch something like this than people who are not a preacher's kid who doesn't go to church anymore. Because even when I was a Christian, I did not like these mega churches. I did not like this concert all-star atmosphere. And I still don't. I like it even less today. And there's really a cult of personality thing at a church like this that goes on. So I enjoy seeing one of these places be pointed out as hypocritical. I will note, this is the church that everybody thinks Chris Pratt went to, and that's why he gets shit online anytime good stuff happens to him. Because this church was sort of anti LGBTQ in some of its forms, but he never attended this church. The church itself has said that. So I'm not holding anything against Chris Pratt. And you know what? Even if he did attend this church, I'm not going to hold that against him. He's not the guy.
You can't hold a church against somebody.
And nobody, when Justin Bieber does something online, nobody's like, you went to that church that Chris Pratt went to, you dirty. But somehow Chris Pratt has become like the poster boy for people who hate Christians. And I just don't think that's very fair, because he seems to be
gay people, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah. Well, they think he does, but I don't think he's ever said that.
No,
anyway,
I don't.
You can watch this on probably Discovery Plus or HBO, whatever they're calling that shit today.
Mm-hmm.
or look for it in your listings on TLC. I've yet to see the 4th episode, but I enjoyed it as a whole, probably more because of the subject matter than the quality of the documentary making. There you
Mm.
go.
Yeah. That uh, I love watching the Righteous Gemstones, by the way, which
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
big, huge satire of those type of churches and all the money that is just being pumped through it and everything. It's crazy. I'll have to check this out too. I don't know. It just seems like more and more we keep running into this. You know that that these big, huge churches or whatever are always they're just money. They're money grifts a lot of the times.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we've known that for a long time, but like especially these big ones. Uh, I saw on the big screens, you know, Sight and Sound came out with like some top 100 or something like that, and it was of course controversial because you know, they came up with some movies that were like, whoa, what are these movies? Some of them were like that, you know, whatever, but one of them that was on their list was Mulholland Drive. And
Oh.
I watched this on a big screen at the local Belcourt with a couple of friends, and I had not seen it in a long time, but this is a David Lynch film, and so it has a lot of David Lynch stuff in it that might turn some people off, but this is one of his best movies he's ever made. And if you just know one little key to watching this movie, it becomes understandable, and it's not totally out there. For you know, if you're watching this going, what's going on? Well, a lot of this is because it's just a dream for the most part. But anyway, um, it starts off with Laura Herring, and she's in a limo, and the limo suddenly stops. Limo driver tells her to get out. Some joyriders, some people who are drag racing come by, crash into the car. Laura Herring gets out and climbs down from Mulholland Drive down to the city of Los Angeles, and then proceeds to go to sleep. And then she goes into this apartment that she sees these two people leaving for a vacation, and she basically takes up residence in the empty apartment while they are gone. And then Naomi Watts shows up, an aspiring actress uh who's just who's been, and we find out that the people who've left the apartment were her aunt and uncle, and that they're allowing her to stay at the apartment. So Naomi Watts, of course, comes into the apartment and stumbles upon Laura Herring, who has amnesia, has no idea what happened to her, and so it becomes a whole thing of where Naomi Watts and Laura Herring try to figure out who she was and who they can find to solve this mystery of where she needs to go. And the movie just goes through a lot of just really segmented type of things. You don't know what relates to what for a long time. There's a really funny segment in this movie where where a guy, I think it's Mark Pellegrino is his name. If a lot of people know Mark Pellegrino from Big Lebowski. He's one of the guys who breaks down Lebowski's door, and is like the main guy going in there to crash down. He's in this movie, and he's playing like this guy who wants to get a black book of some sort from an old acquaintance, and in the guise of friendship, he ends up killing this guy and takes the book. But while he's trying to make it look like it was a suicide, the gun fires and shoots into a wall and hits somebody on the other side. Hilariously, you can just hear this "ow" sound when he hits the. So he goes over. He knows he has to kill that woman now, and he goes over and he goes over to kill the woman, and he's wrestling with her, and then he starts dragging her body into the hallway, and then a janitor sees it, and it's a whole bunch of stuff like that. It's going back and forth. There's like a scene where a guy in a diner describes to another guy a dream he had about this diner and about how there's a scary person behind the dumpster and all that. But this is all intermixed with Naomi Watts and Laura Herring trying to figure out who Laura Herring is. there's a moment where this movie turns and everything you sort of know sort of changes. But one of the other parts of this movie is Justin Theroux. He is a movie director who is he's doing this film that apparently 6 of the top actresses in Hollywood want, but he's lost his main star and now he needs to recast it. But apparently he has no control over who he casts. There are people way above him, way above the studio apparently, who are telling him he needs to hire this one girl and he can't hire anybody else. And once this girl shows up for the audition, he needs to say the code words, basically, this is the girl. And that's that. So there's this going on too. There's all this, like, how does all of this relate? How does this possibly all get gelled together? Well, it's where that movie turns, where it finally gels together, and you realize a lot of what you've been seeing is a lot of people being replaced in a dream, basically. But Mulholland Drive is just a stunning movie. It gets you into a mood. It holds on. It just grips you throughout the whole thing. There's maybe a couple of slow moments, but even the slow moments are just a part of that vibe that it creates. There is sudden Billy Ray Cyrus in this movie. Billy Ray Cyrus shows up out of nowhere and it's hilarious. There are moments in this movie that are just hilarious, and I think a lot of times you watch this and you just think, oh, that's just somebody just doing something really super bad, and it's not very, Lynch isn't this kind of a humorist or anything. He is. Lynch is this kind of a humorist, and like there's just like absolute, don't forget to laugh in this movie, even though there's a lot of heavy stuff that happens. But this is an excellent movie. I had not seen it since it came out. I don't think I may have seen parts of it, but it came out in 2001, and highly recommend this.
Well, and as Wikipedia just reminded me at the top of the Mulholland Drive entry, not to be confused with the 1996 film Mulholland Falls.
Mulholland Falls. The Nick Nolte, Jennifer Connelly.
Chaz Palminteri.
Yep.
If you see Chaz Palminteri, you are not watching the David Lynch Mulholland Drive. You're watching... Well, you can still have a good time with Mulholland Falls if you go in with the right attitude. But that attitude needs to be laughter.
It's funny looking at the comments too. There's a lot of people who hate Mulholland Drive, and I totally understand why. It's not for everyone, I don't think, but I highly recommend it. I think it's an excellent film. So,
well, all right. I think it's time for the big
recommend. Yes, 1992's The Player. Robert Altman directs with Tim Robbins and just a slew of celebrity cameos, and of course people not playing themselves, who are an all-star cast in their own right. But
it's one of those movies where you almost from scene to scene wonder, is that guy playing himself or is he playing a character in the movie? It's not always obvious.
Yeah. This movie starts off with like a big 9-minute unbroken shot of sort of a day in the life of a movie set, where we see a variety of characters move in and out. And a lot of it is a bunch of writers pitching big movies to Tim Robbins, who plays Griffin Mill, a studio executive. And you see your variety everyday pitches. Everybody is pitching Bruce Willis and Julia Roberts for their movie. Everybody. And then in 1992, this is exactly what people would be doing for their movies. You even have the really funny one, and sort of the inside baseball one, is the Buck Henry pitch where he's doing Graduate Part 2. He wrote The Graduate, the first Graduate. Now he comes in pitching The Graduate Part 2, saying, well, Dustin
had a stroke.
Yes, yeah. And then he's like, well, the three principals are still with us. Dustin Hoffman, Catherine Ross, and Anne Bancroft are all here, and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, now that was they have a daughter or something, and or somebody, I can't remember.
That's Julia Roberts. Yeah.
And it's Julia Roberts. And she's now there's going to be a seduction, basically, with a different kind of, I guess, a gender swap seduction or something like that are going on. Gosh, hold on a second, guys. Really great radio. I don't know what's going on with my headphones.
All right.
Anyway, so at the very beginning, we see this day in the life of and everything, and towards the end of it, we see that Griffin Mills got on a postcard, and it's a threatening postcard from a writer who pitched him a long time ago on a script, and never got back to him, which, as you find out from Griffin Mill himself later, we get 50,000 pitches a year, and I can only say yes to 12 of them or something like that. And so it's sort of his justification of being an asshole in the movie or whatever, but it really is like sickening by the time he actually says that excuse. It's pretty sickening that that's what he's trying to do to like defend what he does and everything. Like if we had known that from the beginning, maybe we get a little bit of sympathy. You should never have sympathy for Griffin Mill in this movie the entire time, by the way. The movie does a really good job of making you sympathetic, or else you wouldn't watch this movie. Probably it's just a nasty person throughout. But like right at the beginning, we are told that he might be replaced by another studio executive, Peter Gallagher, playing Larry Levy. And so there's a series of him being worried about being replaced by this other guy. And there's a great scene where Larry Levy is at a breakfast of some sort. He exits the stage by Burt Reynolds. He shakes hands with Burt Reynolds, and then he leaves. And and Burt Reynolds is like, "Who's that guy?" "Well, he's a studio executive at Fox. At least until this breakfast. at least until this breakfast was done, anyway." And then Griffin Mill comes in, and he has a talk with him. And before that, there's a big party. Sidney Pollack talks to him. Sidney Pollack played these roles all the time in the 90s. I always think of his Eyes Wide Shut character, and he's doing that again basically here. But I love the lines in there too, where Griffin Mill is like, "So what are the rumors? Are the rumors true?" And he goes, "The rumors are always true. You know that. You've always known that." And he's like, "Why am I always the last one to know about this?" And Sidney Pollack is like, "You're always the last one to believe the rumor. That's the problem." And so we find out quickly it's not really that he's getting replaced, but they're going to put Larry Levy in as the new hotshot studio exec, who's going to be the guy who, like, I guess maybe has more of the power, but then Griffin decides he has a gambit that he does later on that he's going to try to flip that on him. But there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie, just a lot of stuff. He gets enough postcards from the writer that he's like, okay, now I need to figure out who this writer is. Who was this that possibly did this? And he finds out, he kind of recalls that this has been going on for 5 months. He's been getting postcards like this for 5 months. And he decides he's going to go back and look at all the pitches that he got back 5 months ago. And he's trying to narrow down who the possible writer could be. And he ends up on David Kahane, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. And he goes over to his house to confront him, or at least we'll kind of give him a deal so he can back off on the threats. It's really him just saving his own neck here. Yep. He really does think that this guy's going to kill him. And he calls the house, and he gets Greta Scacchi instead, who is playing David Kahane's wife, not wife, his girlfriend. Griffin always thinks it's his wife all the way through the movie, but she's really interesting, and of course she's really beautiful, and he's outside the house talking to her and observing her while they're in this conversation, and he just wants to know where David Kahane is, but he's also just getting into a lot of just like normal everyday flirty conversation with her on the phone while looking at her painting through the windows. And finally she says, okay, he went to a movie theater and he's watching The Bicycle Thieves and whatever. So he goes to Pasadena and he finds this theater that's playing Bicycle Thieves. He comes in like 5 minutes before the movie's over. nearly trips over David Kane's feet, thinks it's some other dude for a second, and then finally zeroes in. Kahane is obviously a guy who could be sending him the postcards. He is a really, really kind of like touchy character, and just gives him a lot of anger. A lot of anger is coming towards his way. They go out and decide to have a drink at a Japanese bar, and and Griffin Mill's like, I'm going to give you a pitch, man. I'm going to give you a deal. I'm not saying we'll make the movie, but I'll give you your deal, man, because he just wants to save his own ass.
Yeah.
And Kahane, of course, is one of those not a sellout type. He's not buying anything that Griffin Mill is selling. And then as they depart, there is a big misunderstanding of what's happening. There's a fight, and there's an accidental kind of like, they sort of like start to get into a struggle, and Griffin Mill lets the worst of him come out, and he pushes David Kahane down into a puddle of water and drowns him. And you can say that's an accident all you want to, but you can tell by the way the camera work and the editing is in this movie that it's a moment where he has just decided to go over the line. He doesn't have, this isn't like, oh, I accidentally did this. It was, I'm going to push this guy's face into the water and he's going to die, and he's no longer a threat. That's basically what it comes down to. Now he's going back to he tries to make that look like a robbery gone bad and everything. And he goes back to his studio job, and he's trying to work his way into being the power there at the studio. And one of the movies that he sees an opportunity on is this like death row inmate type of movie with like the guy Richard E. Grant plays the writer, and he says he's like gives him the whole thing about how the woman didn't really commit the crime, and that she goes to the gas chamber and the gas pellets fall, and just as the guy's about to save her, she dies, because that's what life is. That's what happens. That's reality. That's reality. Dean Stockwell plays his hilarious like manager or agent or something in this. Dean Stockwell's really good in this movie. But Richard E. Grant gives him this pitch, and Griffin thinks about it and thinks this might be a good thing for me to give to Larry Levy, and to have him shepherd it, and then I will save it when the inevitable problems happen at the end. And a lot of the things is no stars, like just maybe people who are on stage or something like that getting into this movie. We can't have this movie bogged down by personality and all that type of stuff. So that's one part of it. Meanwhile, he's got a murder rap, and the investigators are closing in on him because he did talk to his wife, did talk to David Kane's wife just before he died. And everybody knows he went out to Pasadena to see him, and that's weird. And they really do think he's the big suspect in here. Played wonderfully, by the way. There are two standout performances in the investigator side. Whoopi Goldberg turning in a great performance. This is just after her Ghost Oscar win, by the way. And Lyle Lovett coming in with a great offbeat performance in this. He's just so weird all the way through it. These investigators think that he did it, but they don't know exactly what connects it, what they don't have any proof that he did it. And they're asking him questions, but man, that interrogation scene at the office has got so many laughs in it. Whoopi Goldberg talking about tampons, twirling the tampon in the air while she's talking to him.
These aren't mine. I use Jumbo.
I use Jumbo. It's like, these are Slender regular. So a lot of that stuff. But in the meantime, he's fallen in love with the Gratiscacci character. It's Scacchi, can't remember. It's some, I don't remember. She's off of Presumed Innocent, by the way, which is another movie that I think we'll talk about at some point.
I believe so.
On
yes,
this show. But he's fallen in love with her, and she, I think, knows he killed David Kahane, or at least suspects that that may have happened, but she's smitten with him enough. In fact, got smitten with him enough on the phone call beforehand
Yeah.
that the fact that he killed somebody that wasn't all that important to her doesn't really matter, doesn't really register. She kind of comes off really bad in this movie too, even though
It's dark.
she's very sweet. Um, there's a point also where Griffin, they're in a hot tub. He's in a hot tub with his current girlfriend, who's Cynthia Stevenson, plays this like some sort of underling script reader type person or whatever. And she says something, I'd love to go out to Cozumel or something like that, and have mud baths and massages and drink all this stuff. That's what he does with Greta Scacchi. He goes and does that exact thing. Like all the things that she described, that's what they go do. There's a point where he gets a call from a lawyer saying, or I think he gets a call from Sidney Pollack and tells him that he just needs to go down to a lineup and be in the lineup, because this is the final test of whether or not he's going to get away with his murder or not, is to be in this lineup. But you can see the camera moves over to Greta Scacchi, and she knows that it's probable he's the one who killed David Kahane, and that, but she doesn't care. That's the part.
He freaking tells her when they're having sex. He's like, there's something else I
Yeah.
gotta tell you while he's thrusting. I was responsible for David's death.
And she's like, no, don't say it.
Don't say it. I love you. Oh,
yeah,
man.
yeah. It's really, really, yeah. So that it leads to that great lineup scene where they have Lyle Lovett in there too, just as a decoy essentially, and they have the one witness that was there who's like going through all this, and the whole process is hilarious in itself. The lawyer who's trying to like throw a whole bunch of doubt on what she saw,
Yeah.
and then finally her picking Lyle Lovett, and she's like, oh yeah, that's him. I would swear on my mother's grave. And Whoopi Goldberg says one of the lines of the movie. It's like, lady, where the hell's your mother buried? And where the fuck is your mother buried? I love that shit. It can only Whoopi Goldberg could say that line. So this movie is it's jam packed with celebrity cameos, little vignettes, little like, I think Griffin Mill orders about 10 different brands of water in this.
He does.
I think it's a different one each time.
It is. And I tried Googling some of them, and I think many of them are fictional, or went out of business and have been replaced by a completely different business now. But that's one of, I think, the layers of pretension that the script writes in there for him. It's fun to watch this movie and guess which scenes were scripted solidly and which scenes were improv. Like that Graduate 2 pitch scene feels completely improv to me.
Yeah.
And there are other scenes that are similar, but then the ordering of the water, that's very specific. The girlfriend mentioning the hot springs and then him doing that later. There's so much intention, and yet areas where, and this is very Altman, where he just allows the actors to be the characters. And I will say, watching an Altman movie with the captions on is quite an experience, because there are so many scenes where there are multiple people talking, and the captions, bless their heart, are trying to keep up, but my eyes are not as fast as the people in the movie are talking. You mentioned Whoopi. I love the line when she's interrogating Tim Robbins where he says, oh, in the movie we're making, Scott Glenn plays a detective just like yourself. And she goes, is he a black woman?
Yeah. And then he has to backtrack, like, well, I mean, like detective, not like with any regard to race or sex or whatever.
Almost all the pitches end with, it's such and such meets such and such. It's Ghost meets Manchurian Candidate is the one that I wrote down, but they're all freaking hysterical.
Yeah.
And I love the Larry Levy board meeting scene, his first meeting, where he essentially suggests not using writers anymore. At least
Mm-hmm.
that's what Tim Robbins I mean, he is saying that, but of course, all he's really proving, because they'll throw out, read a news, he has everybody read a headline and he turns that into a
Mm-hmm.
movie pitch, but that's not a written script. You just made a 24-word pitch out of a
Yeah.
headline, but somebody still has to type that shit out. And
Right.
I think it's intended to show that this guy is just stupid and that a lot of people rise to power in Hollywood simply by not offending, as opposed to being intelligent or having, new ideas.
I also like that too, just because of Robin suddenly is a defender of the writer after just killing a writer. That's one of the
Yes.
darkest lines of the movie, is him like, well, it's like, what's an interesting thing, taking the writer out of the creative process. If we could just get rid of these producers and directors, we might have something here or whatever. But he has effectively, in the most real terms, has eliminated the writer from the creative process by killing that guy.
Yep.
But anyway, anything else that there's one other scene I want to talk about, but
get into
else
it.
you wanted to talk about?
I've hit all my notes, or you hit them already, so go for it.
The the last scene where they're filming that movie that's been pitched, that Griffin apparently saved at the last minute or whatever. So it is nothing like the pitch. I mean, it is, but like the stars are both Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis.
Yep.
You don't know it's Julia Roberts for a while, and you definitely don't know it's Bruce Willis for a while. Bruce Willis comes in the most hilarious way imaginable, but
yes,
Julia Roberts comes in, and yes, the gas pellets do fall, but she doesn't die. Like there's enough gas to have killed her, I think, in there. But like not only is Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis in this, but there's like Susan Sarandon and Peter Falk are looking in from the door on the outside. Paul Dooley shows up. There's a lot of a lot of stars in this one shot.
Yeah.
Before you even see Julia Roberts, but the pellets drop. She's about to die, and then like you see some like real fast paced editing, and Bruce Willis comes in with a fucking shotgun. He's like, everybody step back. And like he goes in and like saves Julia Roberts from the gas chamber. And she's like, why did it take you so long? And he's like, traffic was a bitch. And the whole thing at the end, the music, the dialogue, and everything is exactly what happens at the very end of this movie. Where Tim Robbins comes home to a pregnant Greta Scacchi now, and she's like, what took you so long? Traffic was a bitch. And the same music, by the way, Thomas Newman, one of his most different scores. This is before he does Shawshank, but but there's a lot of really cool music, really mysterious and cool music all the way throughout. This is one of his better compositions, I think. But anyway, the player, I don't know, I can't tell from the chat, but it didn't look like some of you like this movie, and I'm not surprised. I was watching this kind of go, I love it. I love this movie, but I noticed that there were some parts that maybe today don't play well. It's a 30-year-old movie at this point. And it may come off a little slow at times. I don't know what the entire consensus here is of the people in the chat, but I am seeing some people who say they didn't like it, which is fine. I love this movie. I think it's a great a great look at Hollywood and how movies are made, and I think it's got a lot of the details right. I think you've got to believe that some of this stuff actually happens on a regular basis. Even stuff like as small as Malcolm McDowell just coming up and saying, and just telling Griffin Mill, hey, if you want to talk about me, don't talk about me behind my back. Come to my face next time. And Griffin Mill is clueless. He has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And the movie also does a little poetic thing by showing Malcolm McDowell, and then the next scene he sees Andy McDowell, and then they have this big huge conversation about Andy McDowell, Malcolm McDowell, Roddy McDowell, and she's like, I'm not related to either of them, so anyway.
Yeah, no, I love it. I thought it was great the last time I saw it. First time I saw it, this time through, I I think what's magic about it is that it manages to skewer almost every facet of Hollywood without really going too hard at anyone to where anyone
Mhm.
involved with this movie would like get backlash in the rest of their career because it's almost gentle in its satire. I mean, it's still pretty biting at times.
Mhm.
And yeah, I love it. It's good.
Yeah. All right. So, what do you think would be a great double feature for this movie, Jeremy?
Before the movie Simone came out with Al Pacino about a digitally created actress, I had an idea for a movie about a digitally created actress and a Matthew Perry Chandler type intern at the studio whose job it was to create the impression this woman actually lived. So rent an apartment in her name and yada yada. And then there's an accidental murder where she
Mhm.
becomes the prime suspect, even though she doesn't exist. And then they came out with Simone, and I was like, fuck it, and I abandoned that. That would be the
Yeah.
perfect double feature for this movie. But that movie doesn't exist. Um, I really wanted to go with Bowfinger because
Ooh.
it is a
Ooh.
similar skewering of the film industry that is both biting and lighthearted. But I feel like tonally it would be a little too different. The player has lots of laughs,
Yeah.
but there's a murder, it's a drama. And
Mhm.
while it may be a little too on the nose, and I'm reluctant to go on the nose, I gotta go Swimming with Sharks, even though I've seen it
Yeah.
in the chat.
Yeah.
There's a missolved murder that somebody gets away with and then
Yep.
rises to power by the end of the movie. It
Mhm.
has evil film executives being mean to people,
Yep.
and it would just it's too perfect a double feature. And
Yeah.
so I think back to back that would be a hell of a 1-2 punch. Um, and yeah, they both end with the bad guy, main character, taking the role of you know of the person that
Yeah.
used to be above them. Anyway, Swimming
No,
with
that's
Sharks.
Swimming with Sharks is perfect. That's one of the Kevin Spaceyest roles of the '90s for sure. That's what he was basically known for, I think, like that kind of role. And he is such a bastard in that movie. Frank Whaley, who used to be like in everything, he might still be in everything, but not as much like higher profile stuff as he used to be. But Frank Whaley's in it. Benicio del Toro has a little moment in there. Is it Michelle Forbes? Is it Michelle Forbes?
Mm,
I get some of the I think it's Michelle
yeah,
Forbes
Michelle
that plays the
Forbes.
girl. Yeah, plays the girlfriend.
Michelle Forbes.
Yeah, and yeah, that movie is like just when Devil Wears Prada came out, everybody was like fawning over that, and I was like, that's just Swimming with Sharks all over again. It's the
Yeah,
same
it's a
movie.
PG-13 version of Swimming with the
Yeah,
Sharks. Yeah,
yeah. So
where there's
anyway,
no
all right,
murder.
yeah, with no murder, at least that we know of.
At
Anyway, Anne
least that we
Hathaway,
know.
always lurking in the shadows. Anne
She
Hathaway is.
is.
Okay, what is our homework for next week, Jeremy?
All right, everybody. This is a movie I've mentioned before on this podcast in answering a question. And this is a movie I have not seen since probably the year after it came out. Big Night, 1996
Ooh,
comedy
oh,
drama, written by
yes.
Stanley Tucci, co-directed by Stanley Tucci and Campbell Scott, and starring Tony Shalhoub and Stanley
Mm-hmm.
Tucci about two brothers who run a small Italian restaurant that is struggling because they have new competition in town with a fancy, swanky new Italian place. And they rally around one night to put on an incredible evening of food for some VIPs that they've invited. And I don't want to spoil anything from there. The movie goes to both dramatic and comedic heights from there. And if you like food porn movies, if you like the food scenes in Chef, then this movie is going to get you all worked up. And you can watch Big Night for free with commercials on Pluto TV right
Mm,
now. You can also
mm.
pay to rent it on most of your streaming places for $2 or $3.99. But this one's a freebie, and I can't wait to see it again. I haven't seen it in probably 20 years.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since it came out, maybe, and I really like this movie a lot too. Like, I didn't see it in theaters, but I think I saw it when it first came out on video. Um, and I remember really liking it. I just have not seen it since, so I'm looking forward to looking at this again for sure because I remember
Yep,
this being good.
it's good. It's good.
All right, do
All
we
right, do we
have
have
time
time?
for a question or two?
I think we do. I think we do. Oh, but I just got to find them. What are your favorite New Year's Eve, New Year's Day movies as opposed to Christmas movies?
Yeah, I mean, there's not many that that revolve around it. At least not good ones, anyway. That revolve around New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. There are a bunch of movies that revolve around it getting to New Year's Day, eventually by the end of the movie, or like somewhere in the movie. But When Harry Met Sally is what I always think about when it
Hmm.
comes to New Year's Eve,
Yeah.
because that's the moment where Billy Crystal, like, you know, says what he was on his mind about how he feels about Meg Ryan and everything, and that's the movie that I think of most of the time, and that's my favorite one that involves New Year's Eve, probably.
Yeah, I answered first, do I even know any New Year's movies? And then I remembered, I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, pretty sure Strange Days takes place on
Yes,
New Year's Eve.
I believe
Um,
it's 1999 or something like that too. It's like a millennium type of
yeah.
deal. Hmm.
And honestly,
Even though,
I should watch this movie again. I saw it in the theater and was perplexed, and I never went back to it.
gonna tell you a secret. This is the movie that I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago when I said I couldn't find it on any streaming
Oh,
whatsoever.
wow.
I wanted to recommend this movie. I have a copy of this on Blu-ray, but it's a different region, so I have to like use my region free player to play it.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I'm looking for it to finally get some sort of following enough that somebody makes a new version of this, that, or, like a 4K would be amazing,
Mm.
especially since Catherine Bigelow has become hot shit since this
Yeah.
movie came out.
Yeah.
It would be really, really great for somebody to do that. And I think it's gotten some sort of like cult following over the years. And I really want this to be a movie that we can talk about one day, but with it not streaming anywhere, I don't know where to tell people to find it other than to find like bootleg copies somewhere. It's not even
Mm.
on YouTube. You can't even find this movie on YouTube, I don't think.
Mm.
If you
That
can,
sucks.
it's if you can find it on YouTube, I think it's somebody like took a camcorder and like shot it on their TV or something, but like that's not the way you want to watch this movie.
No, no. That wouldn't do it justice, I don't think.
No.
Some good answers. I see It's a Wonderful Life. I guess that's New Year's ish.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just watch on New Year's. About Time. I'm pretty sure that one has a New Year's Eve scene
Yep.
in it,
Yep.
and I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
Hudsucker. Interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
yeah, that's some good stuff. We got time for one more question, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you
One
think?
more.
What movie or subgenre do you want to see made in the spirit of another movie or subgenre? Example, a baseball movie made in the spirit of Any Given Sunday. Holy shit.
I want to see like either a Star Trek or Star Wars movie done like a Pulp Fiction. Um, I think of all, especially Star Trek. I think Star Trek this would work really well with, and of course Tarantino was long rumored to be working on a Star Trek many years ago. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but um, it would be a beautiful thing to have a Star Trek that takes off all of the big movie blockbuster sheen and just goes for a story of, some complexity, some thought, some cool dialogue, because we know Star Trek can do that at times,
Mm.
throughout its history as a series and whatnot. It can do some really fun things with its format, and I really think Star Trek like Pulp Fiction would be great. So
You
that's
just
what I'm
made me
looking at.
think, and I think this is along the same lines that you're thinking, but you just made me think about breaking down a Star Trek movie the way Go works, with
Yeah.
3 different stories where there's urgency in every one, and they touch each
Yes.
other and impact each other. So you could have like a lower decks person trying to solve some emergency, and you can be on the bridge for a completely different emergency, and then maybe have an away team or something and keep cutting back.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, drop the sheen, drop the language barriers in terms of like vulgarity,
Yeah.
violence. Let it be R-rated. I want an R-rated Star Trek.
Yeah, and it would still do perfectly fine. I think that a lot of times these studios they get worried that, oh, we're going to kill the goose if we come out with one bad movie or whatever, and it's like, no, you still have the IP to this
Yeah.
amazing franchise. You can always reboot it and call it something else later.
Take a
So
big swing. Look what
take a
happened to
chance.
Star Wars when they kept doing Star Wars the same over and over
Yeah.
and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
I would answer this. I said a golf movie that feels like Moneyball, where a golfer with good but not superstar talent uses his knowledge of math, science, geometry, and physics to improve his game. Basically, a numbers approach. Now, Bryson DeChambeau tried to do this for a year or two with his maximum driving speed, and he was doing all this weight training and swing training, trying to hit certain miles per hour numbers on his golf swing. And he's backed off from that now. But I don't know. I think there'd be something there. And I bet you there are golfers out there who are the top 20 who maybe don't have the purest swing, but are super fucking smart. And so that was my answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would be great. You know, I do wonder, do you know one way or the other, do golfers do this, or have they been looking into analytics on?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure they have. I mean,
Oh,
it's in every sport.
Well, you've got some now that wear health trackers that they've got deals now where, like, in the broadcast, it'll tell you, oh, his heartbeat got up to this on that drive when it almost went in the water. And they also, almost all of them have really expensive swing simulators that you can take it anywhere. You can put it next to you on the driving range. You can take it out on the course and you swing, and it'll tell you everything, man. Ball speed off the club head, how fast you were spinning the club, what your torque was, how far the ball went in the air. It's insane. So yeah, they've really embraced the analytics side of it.
A couple of the answers to this, Josh says, I want to see Falling Down done like Truman Show, but I guess that's really just the game. Yeah, I think that could be. Let's see. Die Hard done like Scott Pilgrim. That's what Jet Smet says. Final Destination like the movie Airplane. So yeah, a superhero movie in the style of Ocean's 11 is a concept I've been toying with. Okay. James says, I would love to see Cloud Atlas mixed with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a parallel story set up in a different live action animation worlds. I think that would work.
Interesting. Well, you can't make Cloud Atlas any worse.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And Jagged finally, he says, I want a Batman where it's a haunted house horror movie and he's the monster.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Exactly. He's the shark. Really cool. Batman Jaws, and he's the shark.
Yep, that would be amazing. All right. Thank you everybody in chat for coming out on this Tuesday. Next week it is big night. Stanley Tucci, Tony Shalhoub. Looking forward to watching that movie again. I haven't seen it in forever. But that's it for this week. See you next time. See ya.
Goodbye, guys. Thanks for coming.